You work hard, you do everything right, but it feels like you're not getting anywhere. It can feel that way as a parent, it can feel that way as a boss, it can feel that way as a follower of Jesus. It just feels that way in life sometimes. Like you're not getting anywhere. There's actually a psychological term for this, and you know what it's called? It's called effort-reward imbalance. Effort-reward imbalance. Studies show that when people put in a high amount of effort with low perceived return, stress levels spike dramatically. Cortisol rises, anxiety rises, and over time, it leads to emotional exhaustion. When you're doing everything you know to do, and it's still not working, it messes with you. It messes with you. And here's what happens when that anxiety comes, when that cortisol rises, when stress levels spike dramatically. The thing that you've been doing that you know to do now feels difficult. It should come natural and it should come easy, but it is difficult. In my time before being the senior pastor, lead pastor here at Mesa Church, I was working for an executive coaching firm for a couple of years, and we worked with CEOs and executives, professional athletes, all kinds of people who had done amazing things in their life and with their lives. But it was so telling to me because sometimes we'd get into a conversation with a CEO or a leader or someone who's made a huge difference already in the world. And overwhelm would often be the thing that was challenging them most. In other words, the things that they had done before to lead to success weren't working anymore. The things that they were trying weren't having the same result, and they were starting to feel overwhelmed. And I don't know, man, it was eye-opening to me to sit across from a high-powered CEO who was struggling to send an email because they were so emotionally exhausted. Have you ever been there? Like the simple task that you know to do, you can't do it. You can't make your bed. You can't seem to get moving. You can't seem to do the thing. Why? Because emotional exhaustion, everything I'm doing, the effort-reward imbalance is real in our lives. Maybe that's where you're at today. You feel like it's imbalanced for all the effort that you've put in. You've not seen the reward. So what do? You become apathetic. You become resigned to a life of less. Because here's the thing, overwhelm has a way of exposing what we trust most. Because when things are going well, it's easy to say, I trust God. God's good. Look at the blessings in my life. But what about when things don't go well? What about when people are looking at you and the winds and the waves are battering you and it seems like you're going to sink? What about when things aren't going well? In fact, here's the thing. Sometimes things not going well is the greatest gift that God can give us. I know you don't want me to be your pastor right now to say that, but listen, sometimes the greatest gift that God can give us is when we're feeling overwhelmed and things aren't going well, because it's in that very place that we can meet Jesus. You see, when things aren't going well, we find out what we've been relying on. Our competence, our experience, our strategy, our sense of control. And hear me, those aren't bad things. God's given us the ability to order our own worlds. I'm not talking about being irresponsible. God's given us competence. He wants us to develop our skills. He wants to use our experience. He can give us strategy. And yes, he can give us oversight to manage our world. But hear me, while those things are not bad things, they can never become ultimate things. You see, strength and skill are good gifts, but they make poor saviors. Strength and skill are good gifts, but they make poor saviors. For the disciples, their strength and their skill, those were good gifts. Their skill on the sea, their strength in the boat, good gifts, but they were not going to save them. Here's the thing about strength and skill, our own talents, our own capacities. They're great because they work until they're not enough. And that's where we meet Jesus. Because when they don't work, we feel exposed. I read a study this week that said this about high performers, people who are very capable and who have already achieved things in their life. They often struggle more in moments of loss of control because they're used to solving problems. So in other words, high performers are the very people that often struggle when things feel out of control because they're used to being the one to make it all work, to fix it all. So when they can't solve it, it creates deeper anxiety. Is this resonating with anyone today? Why? Because our identity is often tied to our abilities. It's often tied into our ability. And the disciples in the story, they're in that exact place. They're skilled. They're capable. They're experienced. But they're stuck. And Jesus is not in their boat. You can have competence, skill, capacity, and capabilities that blow people away. But if Jesus is not in your boat, they're not going to be good enough saviors. They will not be the thing to save you. It might help for a season. It might push back the feeling of overwhelm for now. But here's the thing. When the contrary winds and waves in this life happen to you and to me, and they will, unexpected deaths, unwanted diagnosis, financial problems, problems at home, challenges in our marriage or in our relationships. When those things happen, when the contrary winds and waves happen in this life that are beyond our control, and we feel overwhelmed and outmatched, let me ask you this question. Where in your life today are you overwhelmed right now, even though you're doing everything you know how to do? Where in your life are you overwhelmed right now, even though you are doing everything you know how to do? Second truth for today, and we see in John chapter 6 in this story, is that fear will cause us to misread reality. Fear will cause us to misread reality. Now, we've read this verse twice. Let's read it a third time. Verse 19. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus approaching the boat, walking on water, and they were frightened. I want us to pause here for a minute because this is one of the most famous passages and famous miracles within the Bible. But let's think about it from the disciples' perspective. First of all, it's dark. Second, the wind is so strong that they can't make progress despite their skilled rowing. The waves are high, and now they're exhausted. And then, in the midst of that, now they see someone or something walking to them on the water. So they're probably thinking, we've been at this too long, guys. Like, somebody needs a nap, right? Like, we're seeing things. What is going on? In fact, John's gospel doesn't record everything that Matthew and Mark's gospel records, and that's intentional because John's like, hey, I've got a perspective I'm showing you. Matthew's gospel, Mark's gospel already existed where Peter walked on the water, but one of the gospel accounts says that they thought it was a ghost when they saw Jesus. They misread reality. And instead of recognizing Jesus when he shows up, they're terrified. Again, another gospel account says they thought it was a ghost. And let's be honest, because this is not crazy, by the way. If you saw someone walking to you on water in the middle of the night, your first thought would not be, oh, good, Jesus is here. You'd be like, what? Are you seeing what I'm seeing? This is the moment that happens. Your first thought would be, this is how it all ends. And I'm sure the disciples were interpreting it that way. They've rowed all night. Now they're having hallucinations, so this must be the end. I hope you read the Bible this way, because I think this is a story, right? It's not just a holy book that we can't approach. Like, we should read it and, like, enjoy it. It's awesome. There's so much here. But here's the principle. Fear will cause you and me to misread reality. Because fear doesn't just react to what is. Hear me. Fear does not just react to what is. It interprets what might be. Do you notice the difference? Fear doesn't just react to what is. Fear interprets what might be. That's why sometimes when we're in a situation and we feel panicked, Our bodies are responding like there's a bear in the woods about to attack us, even though it's just an email you need to respond to. Hello, anybody? This is the world we live in. So we're misreading reality. We're interpreting it through the lens of insufficiency, of lack. Fear doesn't just react to what is, it interprets what might be. It fills in the gap, it fills in the blanks with the worst case scenario. Some of us went to bed last night just like this. Filling in the gap with the worst case scenario. Did you know there's a cognitive bias that psychologists have described that's called threat amplification? Threat amplification. Here's what it says. When we're afraid, our brain will exaggerate potential danger. It'll make it up where it doesn't exist. And so we become paralyzed. We underestimate our ability to walk through hard things. In other words, fear distorts our perception of reality. And what's fascinating is this, the very presence of Jesus, the solution to their problem, the answer to their struggle is the thing that they're most afraid of and move away from. That sound familiar to anybody? Like Jesus is the answer. Jesus wants to meet us in our struggle, and yet we hold him at arm's length. We're afraid for Jesus to see our mess. We're afraid to get close to him. Or maybe we're afraid of the very thing that was sent to save us. You see, Jesus was sent to save them. He went to save them, and they were afraid of him. And oftentimes we do the same thing because we're misreading what God is doing in our lives. Here's how we do that. We interpret a delay as God's denial for us. Like God doesn't love us anymore because we had to walk through this delay. Or maybe there's a silence in your life. Like you pray and you ask and you seek and you knock and nothing happens. And so silence is interpreted as absence. But can I tell you that God's silence is not the same as God's absence? In fact, sometimes God will use the gift of silence to draw us near to him so that we can hear his voice above all the noise. Sometimes we interpret difficulty in our lives as abandonment. Well, I've gone through this, therefore I must not be spiritual enough like this person or that person. I've walked through something difficult, therefore God has abandoned me. Just like the disciples, the winds and the waves were real. This is not about ignoring reality. Their boat was threatened to sink. But here's the thing. God was using those contrary winds and waves to show them something better. A better way. And sometimes what we think is working against us is actually God moving toward us. What if every circumstance that you're walking through right now, what if you saw it as a gift from God to bring you closer to himself? Not that it's perfect, not that you prayed for it or want it. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, what if you saw it through the lens, not through fear, which clouds our vision, but through the eyes of faith that helps us to see that Jesus is with us, even in the midst of the unwanted and the unwelcome. I read a stat recently that said over 85% of what we worry about as people never actually happens. I'd say it's closer to like 95%. Some of us went to bed last night imagining things, horrible things, terrible things. We play out the worst case scenario. We make one mistake at work and, my boss is going to fire me. And we fret all day. We say one thing in a conversation, right? We all have this social anxiety, and you walk away and you go, man, I wish I had handled that better. But 85% of what we fear never actually happens. Which means most things that we're losing sleep over tonight are not real threats. They're imagined, but they feel real. They feel real. And what is so challenging and difficult about this is that because they feel real, they will shape how we see things. And we will misread our reality. In fact, let me make this personal for you. Some of us are interpreting our situation right now through the lens of fear. You're filling in the blanks. Blanks that God has not asked you to fill in. You're saying to yourself, this is going to fall apart. It's never going to work. I'm not going to make it. But what if what you're seeing right now is not all there is? In fact, what if God is actually closer to you than you realize? So let me ask you, where are you letting fear fill in the blanks? Everything changes when we welcome Jesus into our boat. The story starts with the disciples getting into a boat, setting across for Capernaum, but Jesus wasn't in their boat. And they were rowing hard all night to try to get there, to try to get to the other side, exhausted, afraid. And Jesus shows up in verse number 20. Let's read it again. But he said to them, "It is I, don't be afraid." Look at verse 21. Then they were willing to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the shore where they were heading. Now, I want to point out a couple of things here in the text. The first is that when Jesus utters the phrase, "It is I," it is the same language that God used in the Old Testament to describe his name, the I am. When Moses is met by God on the backside of the desert before he goes to Egypt and asks Pharaoh to let God's people go, Moses has a question when he's having a conversation with God in the desert, and he says to him, Who should I tell them who sent me? When I go to them and say, let my people go, who should I tell Pharaoh sent me? And God says, tell them, I am has sent you. This is powerful because he's not the God of the past, and he's not just a God of the future and what will be. He's God right now. And that's where we need God. It's not just future hope, it's present help. It's not just future hope, it's present help. He's with us. The I am. So often we think about God and we think about him in the past tense, what Jesus did for us, what Jesus will do for us. But what about now? Jesus says, it is I. I am is here, the present one. Not the past one, not the future one, the only one who's present in all things. And this one, the I am, comes walking on top of all the problems the disciples have, as though he's unbothered by it, which is good news for you and me when we feel overwhelmed. Because Jesus stands above our problems, above the things that loom over our heads. And he uses this language, the I am. This is not just identification, it's a revelation. Jesus is saying the one that you're afraid of is the very one who is with you. And some of us, we've had this fear of God thing mixed up. I believe in fear of God is in reverence for God, but not fear of God that keeps me away from him. Because the one who is with us is greater than the circumstances that face us. In verse 21, it says, they were willing to take him into the boat. Don't miss that. They had to receive Jesus. Jesus will come and he'll stand outside your problem all day long and he'll wave his arms and send all kinds of signs and people to come and help you, but you got to welcome him into your boat. You got to welcome him into your marriage. You got to welcome him into your finances, into your career, into your vocation, into where you're going to go to college, who you're going to marry, who you're going to date. You got to welcome him into your boat. Because as long as you hold him outside, you'll misread what he's trying to do. You'll think he might be part of the problem. When in reality, he's saying, hey, just make room for me. Receive me. Welcome him into the boat. And you know what's amazing? The moment that Jesus steps into the boat, don't miss this, I love this so much. It says immediately the boat reached the shore. This is my whole life. It's like, I'm going to figure it out. And the moment I let Jesus in, it's like, done. That would have been easier to start there. You know? I'm going to work hard at this. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to take it into my own hands. And then I get exhausted. I get fearful. I start filling in the gaps and then the blanks with all kinds of nonsense. And the moment I surrender and say, Jesus, just have your way, come into my life again, be the Lord of my house, my home, and my heart. And all of a sudden, it's like, boom, I look up and Jesus has fixed what I could no longer even worry about because it was so overwhelming. I love this. The storm stopped when Jesus got in the boat. See, listen, Jesus doesn't just want to calm the storm around you. He wants to calm the storm in you. Because so many of us are walking through life and there's storms brewing in our minds and our hearts and our spirits all day long. And that's the real noise that we can't seem to silence and get away from. But the moment we welcome Jesus, we welcome peace into our lives. And his presence will reframe everything we're facing. Immediately they were on the shore. How did this happen? I don't know. And I don't know how it is that the moment that I invite Jesus into a problem, he's able to fix what I cannot control. His presence brings peace when our efforts cannot control the outcome. Notice what Jesus doesn't say when he's standing outside the boat looking at the disciples. He doesn't say, try harder, guys. Where did you learn how to row? What kind of voice are you listening to in your head all day? You should be better. Ah, you almost had it. Maybe next time. He doesn't say any of that. He says, I am here. Don't be afraid. And immediately the disciples welcome into their boat, and all of a sudden they're on shore. Because the answer wasn't more effort. It was more of God's presence. And if I could encourage anything as your pastor, it would be a person who welcomes Jesus' presence into your life daily. Because by Tuesday, all this stuff that feels good right now can be like, where'd that go? Anybody else walking on water on Tuesdays? I'm not, okay? We all need it. It's not more effort, it's more of his presence. So be intentional about seeking it. Some of us are trying to manage situations that Jesus is asking for surrender. We're strategizing, we're controlling, we're holding on so tightly, we're white-knuckling our lives, and Jesus is saying, will you just let me into that? Will you just give that to me? Will you let me into that? Into that boat filled with anxiety, into your marriage, into your leadership, into your fears, into your future? Because the breakthrough is not in your ability to control it. It's in your willingness to surrender it. Here's the thing that I've learned in life. I can have control or I can have peace, but I can never have both. And here's why. Because I actually cannot have control. Control is an illusion. It's an illusion, and it's a tough one to realize. But control is an illusion. The disciples thought they were in control. They thought they had the skill. They thought they had the strength. But they were no match for the winds and the waves that came that night. Control is an illusion. But peace is a gift. And we get to choose what we want to live into. And here's how peace comes. Peace comes when we welcome Jesus. So let me ask you this in closing. What are you trying to manage without fully welcoming Jesus into it? What are you trying to manage right now without fully welcoming Jesus into it? The disciples started the journey confident. We know how to do this. And they ended it transformed, saying, only God can do this. And maybe that's where God's taking you. From a place of self-reliance to a place of God dependence. From control to trust. From fear to faith. Because when life feels out of control, you can always trust the one who controls it all.